Hey everyone, so I've just got a really quick mini lesson for you today, and this comes about in response to some of the questions I've been getting about the discussion evaluation assignment, and I think misunderstanding what I was looking for that assignment. And this is not your fault, right? I think it's a weakness in the way that I phrased the assignment, so I have since updated the language in that assignment to hopefully be a little bit more clear about what my expectations are, and I figured I'd also cover this distinction, which I shouldn't have assumed, for the purposes of the philosophy class. But it is worth knowing the distinction between rhetoric and logic for the purposes of evaluation in the philosophy class. Okay, just I promise, really quick. Okay, so rhetoric differs from logic. So we already know that logic is the study of reasoning well. Okay, rhetoric is similar, but importantly different. Rhetoric is the art of persuasion. Okay, so rhetoric is, I have a triangle here because it's typically conceived of having three components. Okay, so the first one is logos, right? So you've got three Greek words here. Logos basically means the logic, right? So we are persuaded to accept an argument given the logic of that. Okay, so logos involves argument, premises, conclusion, reasoning, and evidence, and explanation too. So how do these components go together? Do the premises does the conclusion follow from the premises? Are the premises supported by reasoning and evidence? This is the kind of evaluation that I'm looking for in the discussion evaluations, right? I want you to be practicing those skills of philosophical and argumentative evaluation, which involve these things. So this is the specific kind of evaluation that I'm looking for. And some of you quite creatively have gone above and beyond this to other kinds of evaluation involved in rhetoric. Okay, so rhetoric includes logos, yes, but there are other ways in which we are persuaded to accept an argument. One of those, oh, my presentation is froze, is pathos. Okay, pathos is about our emotions. Okay, so this isn't necessarily about an argument being well reasoned necessarily, but it's about something that appeals to our emotions, right? If you've ever seen those commercials for charities for animals, right? They've always got these pictures of the saddest looking animals you've ever seen, right? And they're not necessarily making a logical appeal for you to give to their charity, but the emotional reaction that it elicits from us is supposed to convince us to accept their conclusion that we ought to give to that charity, right? Another kind of thing that is really good at using pathos is like alcohol commercials, right? These are everywhere, and people drinking alcohol just seem to be having the time of their lives, right? They're not making a logical argument about why we should consume their product. They're trying to appeal to the emotion of happiness and make us think that this could be you, that you're going to be so happy if you use this product. Okay. We are also persuaded by ethos. Okay, this is not ethics, but it's an understandable mistranslation. Ethos is about the person who's telling us the argument. Okay, so this is about their credibility. Do we trust this person to be giving us good information? It's about their expertise, right? TED Talk presenters are often experts in their field, and so they can establish good ethos in their argument when we know that they are an expert in what they're talking about. Goodwill towards the audience. We don't like to listen to people who are rude and dismissive about their audience, right? If you're hearing a talk from someone, and then like I'm preaching to a bunch of idiots. Well, we don't like to hear that, and so we're not going to be as persuaded to accept that argument. All right. So these are the traditional, vertices of rhetoric, but there is a fourth, less common one, but I think it's a really important one to consider, and that is kairos. This is another Greek word that refers to the timing of an argument. Okay. So this is about the argument's relevancy when it is given and in the context in which it is given, right? We are far more persuaded to accept an argument when we're in the right frame of mind to accept it. For instance, right, it's been shown that judges in court cases are far more lenient on their punishments and judgments after lunch. Okay, so the context, the timing of that argument is well positioned because the person is more readily to accept it, right? We might also think about the relevancy, right? If we were talking about, but I had an example here that I didn't like. How about this for relevancy? You're talking with your friend about what movie you're going to see later, okay? You're going back and forth, you're talking about movies, and all of a sudden your friend starts to give you a utilitarian argument for what you ought to do in the trolley car problem. Doesn't matter if this is the best argument you've ever heard or not, right? It could have perfect logos, pathos, ethos, but it really doesn't have kairos, right? We're like, dude, we were talking about what movie we're going to go see. What are you talking about, right? It's irrelevant to what we were discussing here. So that would be an argument that has poor kairos. And therefore you're probably less willing to accept that argument because of its relevancy to what you care about in that moment. Okay, back to your previous program, right? So the relevancy, the context, the timing of an argument is also important to how willing we are to be persuaded of something. Okay, so rhetoric, when it comes to persuading people, we probably do want to use all of these different aspects, right? If you're remembering from the lesson on Kantian ethics, right? If our hypothetical imperative, if we want to convince someone, then you ought to use rhetoric properly, right? But for the purposes of philosophy and the purposes of the assignments that I'm giving in this course, I really want you to focus on logic. Now, why is that? Well, sophistry. Okay, so this comes from ancient Greece, right? In the time of Socrates and Plato and these great thinkers, these were the enemies, the sophists. Okay, this was a differing school from the academy of Plato, and so these were people who were well regarded as teachers of rhetoric. But the critique of the sophists were that they were using rhetoric in order to convince people of things that they shouldn't have been convinced about, right? They were being intellectually dishonest about their conclusions, and they become masters of rhetoric, but for the wrong reasons, okay? So the point of focusing on logic in philosophical analyses is we want to accept the argument for the right reasons. And traditionally conceived, you can be convinced of an argument for the wrong reasons if you're being convinced by purely the pathos, kairos, or ethos of an argument rather than the logos, right? So the logos is the thing that we can really dig into in our analyses, and that's what I want you to be focusing on for the purposes of this class. Okay, hopefully that was interesting and relevant to your discussions, and please do let me know if you have questions.